to see if we still have people logging in, but I think we're going to get started here. Excited to have a pretty good number of you join us this last year of the month, our last Brunch Bytes. I think we've got an interesting topic looking at, how do you hire people and keep your culture going and bring everybody on board. So we've got a nice panel, and we're excited to be doing our planning for next year. If any of you have some topics that are of great interest to you and you'd like to see us do a deeper dive on them, please feel free to reach out to any of us here at the Circuit, Taryn at the Circuit, or myself, Tracy. I am Tracy Rubin. Some of you I haven't met, the Executive Director of the Circuit. And as I said, we're doing our planning for 2021 for this Bytes series that will be alternating between mornings and noon times next year. And then we also have our CIO circle for the top leaders within your organizations to join as a peer-to-peer network. For them to share their knowledge and expertise with each other. They will be meeting monthly next year, starting in January in the mornings every other month, and February over the noon hour. The noon hour sessions, we're excited, are going to be stories from the members where they're sharing their experiences that they've had within their organizations, projects that they've gone through, successfully completed, and or things they're working on and want the group to help provide them some feedback. So we're really excited to be expanding that program and having them share their knowledge. In addition to the CIO circle, we have our emerging leaders group designed for those folks in your organization that have been stepping up, taking on more leadership responsibilities, and may or may not have had the opportunity to have exposure to some management and leadership training. And so they get together in a peer-to-peer group as well and share their experiences and challenges. There's a steering committee for both those groups that drive their own topics. So they're pretty spot on. So we're excited to see that going. So for today, we've got a great panel. I want to thank Centric Consulting for being our series sponsor for the Bytes this year. You've gone with us and gone through all the changes and been a very gracious host and partner. So thank you very much. So Steve, we're glad to have you today. You'll be moderating. As we do always, we are recording this session and we'll be accepting your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure we get to as many of those as we can. We're going to go just till about 1 o'clock, and then we'll have time to roll into Q&A at the end and go as long as you'd like up until about 1:30 if there are that many questions for our panel. So at this point, Steve, feel free to give us an introduction, tell us a little bit about Centric, and then we'll get started with the panel discussion.
Thanks, Tracy. Kind of before we get started, I would ask that everyone reach out and say a big thank you to Tracy for the work she does for the circuit, but also the coordinating and getting the Brunch Bytes scheduled, and the topics and the panels, et cetera. So I think it's been a great success over the past couple of years, and I know it will continue to be a success. So Tracy, first and foremost, thank you for all that you're doing for Brunch Bytes, but also for the circuit, because there's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes on. So thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Just a quick intro. Steve Bernicke. I co-lead our Centric practice in Cincinnati, Dayton, and Louisville, along with Dion Dunn, who lives in Louisville. So happy to be part of the Brunch Bytes, happy to sponsor it, and actually happy to be part of the circuit. But before we kind of get things kicked off, what we'd like to do is go around with Kevin and Eli, Ryan, and Dan, and let them provide kind of an overview of their role, their function, but also their organization, and then we'll kind of kick things off with a few questions. And if there's any questions, please feel free to hold them, as Tracy said, till 1 o'clock. You can also post it in the chat, and we will make sure we jot them down and make sure we get to them at the end of the presentation. So with that, why don't we go ahead, and Kevin, actually you're first to my right, so I'll let you start out with an intro.
Okay, I'm Kevin Armour. I'm the Chief Information Officer here at Carousel. Carousel is a staffing organization for healthcare professionals, so we staff doctors and nurses and international nurses that come over mainly from the Philippines, but from other countries. So we've got around 1,800 to 1,900 nurses and doctors working throughout the United States right now, and definitely we're swamped because of COVID and all the challenges there to get nurses staffed in each of the hot spots within the United States right now. And then within IT, what my role is really providing applications that help us from a recruiting standpoint. We're building out applications that nurses will be able to utilize, using their phone to give us all the information we need to get them credentialed and working. And along with that, once they're an employee of ours, we have time applications that allow them to enter all their time and really streamline the process around what we do from a full end-to-end recruiting to them working for us. So that's really what we're doing. We're really busy right now, like I said, because just of everything that's going on in, around the world. That's it for me. Go ahead, Steve. Next.
Thanks. Go ahead. Eli, sorry. I was on mute. Thank you for that, Kevin.
So Eli Garland. I work with Kevin here at Health Carousel, and I'm the manager of talent acquisition. So I've been with the organization a little over 5 years, which when I started, we were only around 60 employees. We're now well over 450 internal employees. So growing at a rapid pace. But I oversee all of our internal corporate hiring across all of our brands and functions, as well as our recruitment marketing and how we present ourselves in our employer brand.
Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And thanks for having us. So Ryan Gilley, I'm the vice president with Vernovis. We are a IT consulting, staffing, and solutions company headquartered here in Cincinnati and Mason, Ohio. We also have an office in Columbus. And essentially, we solve IT problems. And there's a number of different ways that we go about doing that. And in my role, I do the hiring, training, and performance evaluations of our team and our growth. So certainly a relevant topic with everything going on.
And Dan? Is Dan with us, Tracy?
I'm here.
Oh, sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
It was thinking when I was trying to unmute. So Dan Bergmann, I'm the talent acquisition manager in Wilmington with a company called Alkermes. We are a biopharmaceutical company. We developed and manufacture the only non-narcotic opioid addiction treatment. We also developed and manufacture a bi-monthly schizophrenia injection and some other things in the central nervous system, but we're also getting into oncology. So from an IT perspective, we're hiring, it's a 400,000 square foot manufacturing site. Obviously the IT as it relates to the workforce there, about 550. But also if you think about all the automation involved in pharmaceutical manufacturing, as well as the labs with the LIMS systems and things like that. But my role, I oversee the hiring for the Wilmington site, as well as I support the external QA operations hiring for the U.S. And then I also process and manage our immigration hiring for the United States as well.
We'll go ahead and get this kicked off with our first question, and Eli, we'll start with yourself. The first one is provide an overview of your hiring practices, and think about it from a pre-COVID, COVID, and then maybe what you anticipate with post-COVID and what that looks like.
Yeah, so obviously a big year in terms of shifting focuses and priority. Going into 2020, we had some pretty big ambitions to grow our internal headcount by quite a bit. And we put forth a lot of effort into scheduling out and doing networking events and different things like that in order to attract and bring in some of the top talent. And then obviously, COVID hit us and everything was switched to a remote capacity. And so what was a general interview process, including on-sites and, welcome interviews and things like that, all switched to a remote capacity. And we've had to transition our entire onboarding process to a remote capacity. And I think one of the biggest things that it's helped us do, if there is positives to come out of these things, is that oftentimes we don't really think about wowing our candidates in the virtual interactions. You know, when we know that we can bring the candidate in and share our culture and show off our office space and kind of wow them in that interaction, you don't often think about the ability to wow them in some of the other aspects of the process. And so this has kind of forced us to take a look at, you know, how do we interact with them as soon as they apply with the organization? What kind of messaging are they hearing? Where are we sending them to gain more information? And making sure that each touch is very personable, because we're never going to get that in-person interaction, unfortunately, at this time. And so it's required us to take a deeper dive into that, and then leaning into 2021, focus a lot of our marketing efforts on attracting those persons where they're at versus, you know, any in-person events that we could have potentially held.
Thank you, Ryan, and then we'll go to Dan.
Yeah, you know, I'd say prior to COVID hitting, I mean, we saw a shift in the talent pool. And for us, that's both our internal talent and the talent that we're recruiting for our clients, you know, and really what those candidates value. You know, I think it's changed quite a bit from the model of, hey, you get a job, you work 30 years, you retire and get the gold watch. Like the candidates are less hesitant to make a move, and they also value a lot more than just what the pay is. They're looking at the company brand, the workplace satisfaction. Are you involved in the community? And prior to COVID, we noticed a huge shift in candidates looking for flexible work hours, just a flexible schedule. So as an employer, we have to evaluate both internally, how appealing are we in the marketplace? We're generally looking for what you would consider passive talent. These people are generally gainfully employed, and our opportunity needs to be either an upgrade for them or a logical next step in their career. You know, and when you look back, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, I remember starting, and, you know, I had a phone, and I had a big old clunky computer, and if I was not in the office, I was not accessible. So a couple things there. We, you know, two of our core values are collaboration and extraordinary service. So for us to be able to fulfill those, we had to be in the office. Now, when you leave the office, you're not accessible, so you can sort of, you can turn off and enjoy your personal life. So nowadays, with technology, with cell phones, laptops, Zoom, you know, you leave the office and you're still accessible. You're looking at emails on your phone, you're taking calls, but has the workplace shifted with that? Are you still doing the 8 to 5 to be there for your clients, but then you're also expected to be available after 5 and before 8, and it's just nonstop. And I think the main thing that we see is that the candidates are looking for flexibility. It's more than just a job. It's where do I fit into the mission and vision of this company? And can I have it interact with my life? So we've certainly made some changes, and we had these in place prior to COVID, but it forced our hand to make them very quickly, as we were remote like everybody else, out of left field. And it's like, hey, this is something we need to get used to. And I think that the internal talent appreciates it, and that's what they're looking for from an employer.
Dan?
So hiring in pharma has been extremely competitive pre-COVID and during COVID. What's been interesting for us is there's just a shortage of talent in Southwestern Ohio. There's really 3 major competitors that we're not competing directly with, but competing for talent. And otherwise, it means relocation. And so, you know, in a time when travel is extremely difficult, and quite frankly, relocation is extremely difficult, it's been a challenge. I mean, we've certainly had to get good at WebEx interviews and remote new hire orientation, and adapting to remote work when necessary. And it's tough to engage, to motivate candidates to commit to a new job, but also a new location, especially when you can't travel there to even check it out. So there's certainly been been asking new hires to take that leap of faith, but it's worked well. I mean, there's some bugs up front sometimes with WebEx and things like that. Yeah, obviously it's cut back on not only the face-to-face interviews, but it's impacted our new hire orientation. We can't give a tour due to social distancing and things like that. Things that were typically highly regarded aspects of the experience, but we've tried to make it a point to engage new hires, remote or otherwise. And we have a very collaborative culture, so that's conducive to helping people feel like they're part of it. But beyond that, I mean, there's a welcome kit that we've been sending out, and there are other little initiatives through the intranet and so on. Looking forward, I do think a positive of this is a greater openness to remote work. We've had folks, especially when I support some of our hiring in the greater Boston area. Our U.S. headquarters is in Waltham. People would say, "Look, I love the job. I love what you're saying, but I'd like to work from home 3 to 4 days a week." And before that was not on the table. But once this is over, I suspect we'll return to a hybrid model, maybe a 2-3 split, maybe a 1-4 split. But it'll certainly help, I think, open up the candidate pool, but also, as Ryan had mentioned, help foster more of that flexible schedule that people are craving.
Kevin?
I think like Dan was saying, I think the big change is the ability to hire remote workers. Pre-COVID, we made sure that we interviewed people face-to-face more so, unless, from a contractor standpoint, we do bring in a decent amount of contractors, and those typically were video conference type calls because we want to turn it pretty quick. So that's one of the keys is as we hire, we're pretty quick to react and quick to get back to people so that you don't lose them, because the competition is out there. So during COVID, it all has switched to, video interviews. And even with that, though, we've opened up the boundaries, and it doesn't really have to be somebody based in Cincinnati. We hired somebody from Seattle not too long ago. That's actually moving here in whenever she decides, basically. The plan, and it's not just that type of individual. We have somebody that works out of Pittsburgh, and we have nobody else there. So, we're opening up our boundaries and looking for people that really want to work for us and take the passion that we have about staffing healthcare professionals out in the field and getting them working. So we've opened up the boundaries, and remote. Previously, we were 2 days a week outside the office working remote. In IT, organization-wise, it was kind of on a case-by-case basis. But now, since the whole company's pretty much remote, I think people are realizing that remote can work. And I think one of the big keys there is remote can work if the manager manages the resources versus having IT manage the resources. Lots of, things like that. Oh, can you make sure that somebody's connected? Can you watch them on Skype or do things like that? We say no. It's just the facts that, we're working remote. You should be able to manage your individuals remotely. So we're really focused on bringing in good candidates that, based upon what they need to get done, they get done. So we continue even after COVID. Yeah, we'll probably go more 3 days work from home, 2 days in the office. We're running out of office space, so and that will help to be able to flex people and schedule people in and out. Makes it a little challenging now because people don't really want to share a desk, even though it's cleaned every night. It's just one of those things that right now, but as we open everything back up, hopefully we'll be able to utilize the space in better, more efficient manners than we do today, especially with the office being a lot of remote and still coming in the office. But then also, like I say, looking for opportunities to hire really good talent that just wants to work remote full time.
The onboarding process was mentioned at least 3 or 4 times as you talked about the hiring practices today and COVID, pre-COVID. Can you talk about what your onboarding process looks like now and how you see it changing going forward? And we'll start with Ryan and then we'll move on to Dan.
Yeah, I mean, you know, currently the same requirements are in place, but you can't oftentimes do those face to face. So we've had to get creative quite a bit, but you know, that the onboarding process, aside from just the mandatory things that we're checking, we're getting people set up with direct deposit, and they're doing drug tests and background checks. That is your first experience with the culture of the company. And when you're doing that remotely, your experience, you know, instead of coming into an office and really just taking in what it feels like to be in there, meet the team, you know, your experience is with that one individual that you're dealing with, and it can be very transactional. So I think it's, you know, we've identified that and realized, hey, we need to get creative and make sure that if someone were to start and they come in our office, you know, similar to most offices out there previously, you get a Yeti and a t-shirt and you meet everyone, and it's just, you feel like you're part of the team and you understand the organization and, you know, whatever's written on the wall, there's all sorts of nuances that each company use. And when you're getting mailed a background check you got to fill out and then mail it back and simply correspond that you did so, it's just a very transactional experience. You don't feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. So that's what we think about often, because our internal talent, obviously, some are back, some are still remote, but our consultants are very much part of our internal talent, and they're interacting with our clients. So it's critical that we make them understand that they're part of our team, and we've got to get creative to give them exposure to that.
Dan?
So we're fortunate in the sense that as the global manufacturing site, we need a large segment of the workforce to be on site. QA, IT, validation, you know, folks like that. But especially as it relates to the remote, you know, right now we've got someone relocating from Oregon, someone relocating from Kansas City. The Oregon relo got delayed due to COVID. So instead we're shipping him a laptop and we're adding a remote component to this upcoming Monday's new hire orientation. And also as it relates to immigration, USCIS and the Department of Labor, quite frankly, are both taking longer for probably a couple different reasons. But, you know, those are critical hires, typically highly educated, highly skilled. And so, you know, that's been a challenge too, trying to juggle H-1B amendments as it relates to the timing of things. So it's just a little more complicated. It's a little more to keep track of, but fortunately at this point we're well practiced. But and I think it was touched on earlier, you know, when you can go on site, you can see really, you can feel what we're doing, whether it's the timeline on the wall or our big statement regarding EHS that everybody signs and our commitment to safety. You can feel the culture by and large. We talk about being patient inspired, and that's not just something on the wall. I mean, when you think about addiction, schizophrenia, MS, cancer, I mean, those are hard hitting diseases, not just for the patient, but the patient's loved ones. And that really motivates us and frames a large part of our culture. And I just can't help but wonder what it's like to sit in a home office and hear about it, but not necessarily get to feel that camaraderie and so on. So, I mean, that's a challenge that we're working through. We're considering well, we've recently opened up a lot of different employee groups for different you know, backgrounds as it relates to diversity and other things, other interests. But we're also exploring like kind of a buddy type program where, you know, we're not going to be able to meet in person for a cup of coffee, but, you know, if you ever have any informal questions or you want to catch up once a week, or you know, just talk about what's going on in the industry, or that you'll have somebody that's been with the company for a little while that can kind of take you under their wing to help you feel connected.
Kevin?
Like Dan said, I think the biggest thing for the onboarding is the integration into the team and the employee engagement. It's extremely difficult because we're both shipping out equipment and having people drop into the office for the 5 minutes to gather all the equipment, depending if they can get in, and really ultimately if they feel comfortable coming into the office. We pretty much let them decide whether or not they can come in or not throughout all of our offices, if they can come in and get equipment. But the actual onboarding and getting them integrated into the team is really part of the team piece, but you miss all that other overall department feel and what we can do to engage employees, understand the culture, and exactly like, how do you get the passion for helping to, get nurses out and understand the business side of things versus, just coming in and starting doing your job as a developer or any other IT type function. So the onboarding has definitely been a challenge. And we're doing a lot of it, and Eli can touch on kind of the HR side of things.
Yeah, so I think one thing to consider about onboarding this year is really the onboarding process for the talent that you want to win starts at the beginning of the interview process now, because everything's done in a remote capacity. And if you're not building meaningful relationships and having meaningful interactions with that candidate from the moment that they apply, you're running the risk of them not having a meaningful relationship with the organization, and that can directly affect your attrition. If they're going through the onboarding process and it's monotonous and it's mundane, and they don't feel like they're bought into the bigger picture, as some of the other speakers mentioned, then you're looking at a high chance that because they've only engaged with you over the phone, they've started work remotely, they can very easily decide, I'm no longer going to be with this organization, I'm going to go somewhere else, because they don't have that loyalty, they don't have that relationship with the company. And so I think it's important, as we talk about the onboarding, is that it now starts again from that first interaction, and making sure that you're creating meaningful impact throughout the entirety of their interview process, all the way to their start and through their first 6 months.
Dan, I think you mentioned that the talent pool, was kind of minimal for yourself with 3 or 4, high competitors that are vying for the same candidate. We'd like to talk a little bit about what you think the greatest opportunity or challenge you see in finding the great talent. And we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Kevin.
Yeah, it's truly scarcity. So, there are the 3 in Cincinnati. There's 1 in Columbus. But to add a wrinkle to it is, what we do is biopharma, or at least pharma experience, is usually going to be pretty important, because we're a GMP manufacturing site, and there's just so much regulation associated with that. It'd be a pretty steep learning curve for somebody outside of the industry. But I look at things like the unemployment rate, which for November in general nationally was 6.7%. But they also measure 25 and older and bachelor's degree and higher, in which case that unemployment rate is 4.2%. And a lot of sources would consider 5% a fully employed economy. But so what does that look like when you're looking for somebody with a master's degree and 10 plus years of experience? They don't measure that. But I mean, to the point earlier, that your next great hire is currently working for a competitor somewhere. And so, how do you motivate them to accept our opportunity? Wilmington, Ohio, as quaint as it is not the easiest sell to somebody in Portland, Oregon, or North Carolina. But fortunately, Cincinnati is especially attractive, especially for folks with families. The immigration piece can help as well, that we're willing to sponsor for green card. But I'd say just about any search we open is going to be a relatively national search, unless it's one of the more entry-level positions. And so that's just an ongoing struggle.
Yeah, I agree. As far as the talent pool goes, it's not really opened up any more than last year or the year before. It's still very tough to find the talent. I mean, the nice piece right now, though, with us is being able to look nationally and not have to worry about that person needing to move here. But that could be more short-term thinking, because you want your team, once we all are able to get back into the office, you want your teams together and more connected, especially from developing applications and collaboration and things like that. I mean, I know developers and a lot like to work from home, but I think, there's been a lot of talk about, each of the big companies out in the Silicon Valley, they're allowing everybody to work from home, but they're definitely seeing some of the challenges from a collaboration standpoint, from creating product, from being able to really dive in and whiteboard and do all that as a group. So I think some of those are the big challenges. And even though some companies are having some reduction in force, we're not seeing a whole lot of talent that just makes it easy to find people. It's still very hard to find people. And I think, like Dan was saying, they're working for somebody else. And I'm not real, convincing somebody to leave a current gig that they have in these trying times is a challenge, because, it's stable. They know what's happening if they're internal to the company, unless there's a lot of angst going on around them as far as, things coming, the revenue's not hitting, or they can see the writing on the wall. Those are the types. But for the most part, though, it's still not open season as far as hiring developers and really good IT talent right now. It's still very, very challenging.
Eli, and then we'll go to Ryan.
Yeah, definitely second Kevin on the challenge of hiring in IT and really just hiring in general. But I think something else that I've at least noticed in the analytics is the increase in our time to fill average. And I think that's a direct correlation with the market, as Dan mentioned, at 6.7% and even less, with that higher tier of education. You're talking about people who are only going to be on the market for at max 2 weeks. And so our time to fill went from 23 days, which was already a pretty quick time to fill, down to now 17 days on average. So, I mean, we're turning things around, and we've instilled with our hiring managers and our team, we've got to make decisions fast. We've got to get answers back to candidates. Even though there's been this drastic change where, the unemployment spiked and is now balancing back out, I do believe that it's still in the job seeker's favor a lot of times. And so you have to be able to leverage, whatever your organization has that's going to be able to stand out from the competition, make decisions quickly, and move on that talent when you have the opportunity for it.
Yeah, good points, Eli. I think with this COVID stuff, we were able to get a bit opportunistic, where there was talent that previously didn't exist, that something happened either with their situation or their organization, where we were able to identify them as great, impactful people, as leaders that would fit well, and onboard them. But, I think that the hardest challenge for most companies, including ours, is, hey, our people and the growth of our people is our top priority. But then we wait until we have an opening, a glaring need to go out and recruit that person. Or maybe there's one individual responsible for talent acquisition, when ultimately that is a entire organizational function that we should constantly we should identify what it is that we're looking for that makes us tick. What is it about our best employees that we value them and they really succeed in our culture? And it's a constant a pipeline of these people that could be at any stage of, hey, they're looking for a job, to, hey, maybe they're comfortable right now, but you just don't know what the future holds. So that's been, I'd say it's a challenge and an opportunity to really, understand what that person looks like. A lot of times some of the best employees, they've got this great story, right? Where they've fought their whole life and they've fought adversity and they paid their way through school and they've just made themselves out of nothing. That's great, but it's hard to replicate that. And that, the next person that you meet that maybe doesn't have that amazing story could still be great for your culture, but you haven't identified what those qualities are. So it's an ongoing, people pipeline, and the whole organization, when they meet someone that they know should be on the team, bring them in. And maybe we don't hire them that day, but at least we're not always starting from scratch when there's a need.
So we'll start with you, Kevin. And we talked a little bit about, kind of the pain and tough to find, the right employee. We talked about looking nationally. We talked about the time to fill metric, Eli, that you mentioned, and it decreasing from 23 to 17, and also the unemployment rate. as you think about just some of those changes that have occurred, have you guys had to adjust your compensation structure to accommodate?
No, not really. Pretty much staying in line with everybody else. So, I mean, I think from a compensation, we're pretty aligned with everybody within the Cincinnati area. When we go outside the Cincinnati area, we do try to at least look and make sure that we're closer aligned probably with Cincinnati salaries than, you know, like the person in Seattle. We're not really compensating based upon that, knowing that they're going to be moving here is one thing, but also just making sure that we stay aligned with what we do. We utilize a lot of boot camp type of developers to start off with. I mean, we have a blend of boot campers, and then we also have a blend of more senior level type people that we hire for. So we're, you know, kind of across the board hiring as far as senior, and then all the way down to just people that have just, you know, graduated from a boot camp. But our comp plan has just been adjusted based upon overall cost of living and just watching the market within the Cincinnati area for the most part.
Eli?
Yeah, I think, like Kevin said, we haven't necessarily adjusted the comp plan. Instead, I think that specifically with my recruiting team, we've adjusted the conversation. You know, no longer are we spending so much time talking about, you know, simply just the compensation package and the numbers there, but rather, you know, what else are we talking about? We're talking about being in the healthcare industry when we're facing a pandemic, and you see that a lot of, you know, industries aren't necessarily viable during times like this. We're talking about, you know, the investments that we're making as an organization into different aspects of our company so that we can continue to grow at a rapid pace. We're talking about the flexibility that we've already had in terms of, you know, your ability to work remotely, and then also the investment that we've already made in online learning platforms and how we're engaging you from a career development standpoint. And so I think having all of those things in place, you know, it's simply just a change in the conversation where I don't necessarily think people put compensation number one any longer in terms of what they're looking for and how they're going to say yes. And I think we've taken advantage of that pretty well.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what Eli mentioned. I mean, we have seen the conversation change rapidly where, you know, especially with the more seasoned workforce, you know, the salary, the total compensation, people have bills to pay and it's relevant, but the questions go to what is the company about? Where do I fit in? And as the company grows, how do I grow with it? And that could be from a responsibility standpoint, from a compensation standpoint. But there's questions about, hey, community involvement. Do you give back? Like what do you do on holidays? What's your maternity or paternity leave look like? And, you know, even more so with a lot of our clients, you see that as a marketing tool, albeit it's the right thing to do. But you're reading some of these sort of value props that when you join this organization, hey, this is the salary and it's competitive with, you know, other companies in the industry. But here's some things that we do for our internal employees where, hey, we give you a paid day off on your birthday. Or, hey, once a month, you can go and donate your time to a charity of your choice on us. Like those type of things that the candidate pool is just always asking about. And it's a good reminder to us that all very important things to us. And so how do we compare to our competitors out there? Are we an employer of choice? So yeah, the salary, I mean, the compensation is never going to go away, but as the company grows, what's in it for the people doing the day-to-day? So that's where the conversation has really changed.
Dan?
Paternity leave makes things 10 times easier, by the way, having my second, having that as an option. So, yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of the other folks, I would say that it has become more multifaceted in terms of, you know, what's going to motivate someone to join the company. But in terms of the dollars and cents, I mean, our corporate comp philosophy is to pay at least a little above average. And so what we do is we pull the external market data. We use Radford so we can see what the industry pay is for the specific level of position, and our IT roles are going to be salaried with a bonus of some percentage of that. And so I have seen the salaries go up a little bit. I mean, noticeably, to the point where normally we would pull the data. Okay, here's the range. The 50th percentile, 75th percentile, and in terms of internal equity, where how would this candidate maybe stack up against so-and-so versus somebody else, just so that we're being mindful of education experience, industry experience, and things like that. But we have gotten to the point, especially this year, I would say even or the beginning of the year, maybe even to some degree last year, where market was going to be a little above, where the market salary ranges have inflated faster than our merit increases and things like that. And at which point we would actually give an adjustment to the rest of the team at mid-year or year end. So fortunately, we haven't been handcuffed to an internal equity. And I joke that I've gotten so many people raises that have no idea I was involved, but that's how we go about it. And quite frankly, I can't think of many that we've lost to the salary piece. It doesn't seem to be quite the deal breaker that it might have been in years past.
Eli, we'll start with you on the next one here, which is, how have you been able to communicate and build on your culture with new hires?
Yeah, so that's been obviously a pretty extreme challenge, and really we've just shifted the focus again to, as soon as they apply, how are we making a personal touch? How are we making an impact? How are we starting the relationship from there? And then through their pre-onboarding and onboarding, who are we connecting them with in the organization? Which group meetings are we bringing them to? We have monthly recognition meetings, and we have quarterly larger recognition meetings. We have breakouts with teams and sub-teams. And so, we trust a lot of the leaders to engage their teams, on their own levels that are going to be able to make the impact and build the culture within their team. We provide the resources that we can to, encourage that and aid that, and then do things on a company-wide level, like sending out just a thank you swag box kind of in the height of things to remind everybody that, what we're all here for, and that we'll one day kind of all get back to the office together. And so we've just had to think about it differently, but every interaction that you have with a candidate, be it interview, onboarding, pre-onboarding, you've got to make that meaningful, so that you can have that relationship with them, and you have something that they want to eventually come into and be a part of.
Ryan, and then Dan.
Yeah, I mean, so we're doing business development, we're doing recruiting, we're offering solutions, and there are, believe it or not, for anyone recruiting out there knows I'm joking, there's tough days. I mean, there's up and down days. There's days where you're not having success talking to clients, you're not finding the candidates that you need for the job. And from a cultural standpoint, if it's just about that, you're going to get burnt out pretty quick. So a focus of ours is that you have to understand the mission, the vision, and what our values are. And we value performance, but we value performance done the right way. And that's something that we talk about often. And that's how we will grow. We hire an employee. They need to understand where they fit into the mission and the vision, the values that it takes to have a high performance, but ultimately what is expected of them. Like what am I supposed to do on a weekly basis so I can feel like I had a good week? And we talk about the teach, train, equip model. Are we giving the internal employees enough, especially virtually, and there's technology challenges that previously didn't exist? We have an obligation to make sure that it's feasible to hit expectations. And we're a small enough company currently that our CEO gets involved often and talks about, this is what we founded the company on, and this is what our vision is, and here's how we're going to get there. But there's access to every single employee and their experience with Vernovis and what they see in the future. And there's a great deal of pride in that. But the challenge is, as you want to onboard people, their experience is going to be based on who they're interacting with, which sometimes could be one manager. So the obligation is they need to meet leadership and different departments and get creative and really understand what we're all about, and then understand where their job fits into that.
Dan?
I'm half joking, but sometimes I wish we did a little less. There are a lot of company-wide initiatives in the forms of town halls, messages from the CEO. We do an employee engagement survey that we then have focus groups and task forces and things like that. We do site-wide things as well. It's easier on-site, easier and harder. I mean, our site loves to eat, and so those cookouts and the steak lunches and I mean, not often, but surf and turf day, and those were really fun ways to come together. I already touched on the patient piece and how that helps drive the collaborative culture. So I mean, there's certainly a lot of initiatives, different employment groups, and a lot through the intranet. We just overhauled that, and that's been huge. But I think the challenge, and the point was made a moment ago about some people having limited exposure to one or two people, and I think if you don't respond to some of these things, or you don't participate in some of the activities, it'd be easy to feel fairly detached. And something that we were talking about with actually earlier this week. It's just a different experience between somebody that's been a part of this, that knows people, that's been in meetings with folks, that knows the site or the Waltham site in Massachusetts, that's now working remote, versus someone that's never met these people face to face, that's never done the community service day together or team building or otherwise. Does that person maybe feel a little more detached than we're mindful of? And so to some degree, this is part of an ongoing conversation with that in mind.
Steve, can I add something to that as well? Just that Ryan and Dan both talked about it, but I think another factor in this is communications. We've made a huge investment in our communications and how we're communicating to our employees. Like Ryan said, communicating their purpose in the organization and how they directly impact it, communicating wins. Dan mentioning that they, made a huge overhaul to their intranet. I think communications is another thing that's coming up big in 2020. As everybody's so spread out, it's really hard to keep everybody focused on the same initiative, and that's where you're going to be able to make that investment and do that right.
Yep.
Kevin.
Yeah, like Eli said, we made a big investment in communicating and recognition meetings and things like that, but it's all through Teams. I mean, we utilize Teams. A lot of people are on Teams calls from 8 hours a day, and it's exhausting at times because you just get a little bit tired of it. But the onboarding piece, bringing employees in and getting them engaged in the culture is very difficult because, again, like Eli said, it's up to the leaders, and that just adds more to our plate. That now, before is hallway grabs, coffee station talk, get people engaged, communicate with them. Well, now it's make sure I schedule at least a 15-minute video call with anybody that's coming in new on that Monday or whatever, and at least get to know them and go through that. So that's just whereas before it's just drop by their workstation and chat with them for 10, 15 minutes, get to know them, take them out to lunch, do those type of things. Those are just all things we're not able to do. Some additional things from a cultural standpoint, IT was really starting to, volunteer as a team. So go out to various nonprofits and do some work for a day as a team, because we get volunteer hours that we can consume each year. And we haven't really done that this year like we did. And that helped just build our teams up, team camaraderie and things like that. So it's extremely difficult, the engagement process, and just getting those new employees understanding the culture and what we really have to offer and what we're doing. Mission, vision is all critical to know. But when you're not in the office, you don't hear it as much. And I think as you're in the office, you see the placards on the wall, the different posters, things like that definitely help you think about those things and just jumping on a video call and you know, collaborating and doing that, we're just missing a lot of that. So hopefully we'll get back to the point where we can start doing more of that and, you know, it be more fluid and not so scheduled and things like that, because I think that's what's making it tough.
So Ryan, we'll start with you on the next question, and kind of back to dollars and cents. But if you had to adjust your budget, you know, for finding or onboarding talent because of the impact that the pandemic and some of the other national things that have taken place?
Well, we've certainly had to adjust, you know, and I think that it plays into the cultural piece. You know, if a normal onboarding, you know, that first week we're having lunch and we're doing a happy hour, we're doing coffees and breakfast and really trying to get to know the team. We're obviously not doing that anymore, you know, because just with the precautions and even the folks in the office, you know, we don't want to be reckless and take the whole team to happy hour. But at the same time, if our only interactions are face to face, like how are we going to get to know one another when things do get tough? So we've tried to get creative. We've got an amazing operations team. I can remember, you know, in lieu of some of those happy hours, we all received gift boxes of little chocolates and popcorn and all that type of stuff. And we opened them up during a meeting. And something as small as that was just like, wow, it was a reminder that, hey, we're a team. This is something that normally we'd be doing, and we have to make the best out of it. But we can't forget that, hey, just because we can't go to happy hour, that doesn't mean that we can't get to know one another. Like we've got to get creative here. So those budget dollars have went to a little bit more focused marketing with finding the internal talent. But yeah, certainly adjusting and still trying to figure it out, quite frankly.
Dan?
So it hasn't necessarily changed. Well, I have to actually look at the hard numbers, but I would say in terms of like spend on search partners and things like that, that hasn't changed. But certainly travel costs are down because we're not bringing candidates on site from all over the country. But on the other side, our temp housing costs, when we reload somebody, depending on the level, they get at least 30 days of temp housing. But we've had to often add to that to give them time to quarantine before coming on site. So that is a COVID-related impact there. And then just shipping costs as it relates to onboarding if they're starting remote. And then, you know, instead of the backpack full of goodies and other things in person, you know, we're sending gift packages out as well. So I would say overall minimal, but certainly I've had to make some adjustments.
Kevin and then Eli?
I mean, budget-wise, yeah, we haven't consumed even close to the amount of budget that we had budgeted for employee engagement. You know, a lot of the things we have tried to do is, you know, Uber Eats, passes, things like that, sending those out, you know, which is time consuming, to be quite honest with you. We have, you know, project milestones we hit, project launches. We want to be able to provide some, you know, something that we used to provide, which was, you know, a pizza party afterwards, or bring pizza and do things like that. Well, now, instead of doing it that way, you're going and having to ship out, you know, 20 different coupons or, you know, $50 certificates, and that just takes a lot more time than calling up La Rosa's and saying, you know, send me 10 pizzas and doing it. So I think that's some of it is just the time consuming aspects of trying to keep people engaged, and it's it is harder. It makes it very difficult to try to keep that going, but you need to do it because you need to make sure that people are, you know that you appreciate all the things that they're doing and just don't let it go. And that's where I'm finding some of the biggest challenges, just the time consuming nature of that. Like I say, drop by, you know, hey, let's go across the street to Starbucks, get a cup of coffee, let's chat, things like that. Those things are just not there. So that part of the employee engagement and networking and team is the part that's been most difficult to make sure that people really truly feel needed, wanted, and understand what we're trying to accomplish. So it just lots more communication, lots more team meetings to try to get that across, but those are very difficult to get those points across.
Yeah, for me and my team specifically, budgeting and budget planning has shifted dramatically. We made a huge investment when planning for 2021 that we were going to do a lot more in-person networking events as we really found our stride with that in terms of recruitment and attracting talent. Well, we're not able to do those events, and so we've shifted those dollars. And when you're talking about everybody being remote and everybody being online, well, that means that everybody's making a lot of noise online. And so you've got to figure out, how do we stand out in this market, and where do we put our investment dollars to make sure that our message is heard, and that we are a standout employer of choice as it pertains to competitors and other individuals that are hiring within the market. And so as I'm planning just our 2021 budget, the cost of running an in-person networking event, and having the food catered, the music brought in, and the this and the that, that cost is a lot higher than, hopping on a Zoom call at Sunday at 7 p.m., where you're at most going to spend, a few $100s in advertising for the event. And so planning in my case, particularly with our team, has shifted dramatically. And I think a lot of people are going to have to take a good hard look at where their budget dollars go in the first half of 2021, as we're not really sure how this thing's going to shape out.
Thank you. What we'd like to do is kind of open it up. I don't know, Tracy, if there's been any questions in the chat, but just we're at the top of the hour and want to make sure that we do provide some time for folks to ask questions of the panel, if there is any.
So we have had a couple, and please continue to put them in the chat, and we'll get them out to the team. So one of the questions came from Kathy, which was, being disconnected and some of the things you've referenced and challenges in recruiting new talent and onboarding them can apply to your current and existing staff. So how have you all shifted activities to continue to keep your current staff engaged? So Kevin, I'll start with you, because you just kind of referenced that with your, when a project ends, you're kind of doing the coupon thing. So I'll let you start there and go to Eli, and then to Ryan and Dan.
Yeah, I think from the, trying to stay connected, it is those type of things that, trying to make sure that we do the shout outs, we send out emails to the whole company saying, here's a win, we just launched this new product, new feature, things like that. But try to engage and, go out to Amazon, give $25, go find something on Amazon for yourself. Have done, like I say, the restaurant thing where, just sending out, go get lunch, grab lunch on us type of thing. So it is time consuming, but it needs to be done to celebrate the wins. That's the big thing, is being able to celebrate the wins as we, continue building out solutions.
Yeah, for my team, sometimes engagement is not just talking shop, in our meetings, adding something different into the conversation, so that, it's not just being online on meetings all day, talking numbers, doing this and doing that. And then, sometimes it's just giving that individual the opportunity to completely disconnect and say, hey, you've had an absolute killer week, and what I'd like for you to do is shift your priorities on Friday, maybe, put everything into the morning hours and go ahead and take off early, and truly disconnect. Because I think, we oftentimes think of engagement, well, how can we, get another event or put more time on their calendar, or, put them on the camera more, and that's exhaustive. As Dan mentioned, sometimes you wish we could do less. And so it's simply saying, hey, not only do I want you to go spend some time with your family or your loved ones or doing something different, but I want you to completely disconnect, turn off your email, turn off your phone. I'll handle the work for you for a few hours, and you just get some time back. I think that's a meaningful engagement on a one-to-one level with some of your direct reports.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, there's certainly a creativity there that you have to focus on. I think back, especially, we're remote for the first time as a team, and we had a onesie Wednesday at one point. My daughter walked in, I'm there in a onesie on a Zoom call. But just, a lot of creativity to lighten the mood, and that is something you normally do in an office. Like if we're all in an office together, it's not just go time. As when you get on these Zooms, you got a camera on you, and it tightens the mood a little bit. So we've certainly tried to empower people with different ideas. And the piece of feedback that I have been extremely proud of our organization is our Columbus team has referenced, hey, they're as close to our Cincinnati team as they've ever been. A lot of these individuals just didn't have a reason to communicate a ton because they were both in their different pockets of the business. And now in these virtual calls, it feels like they are working together a lot more. And then we've got a virtual Christmas party tomorrow where everyone gets a box, and we've got a couple of cool things planned. But it's the creativity, because to not acknowledge that we're just on Zooms and missing out on the things we used to do. And Dan, I wouldn't mind hearing about, you said steak lunches and surf and turf, man. That's got to be a cost savings for Alkermes, not having to host those anymore.
Not this year. Right.
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I appreciate you not wearing a onesie today, despite it being a Wednesday.
See my top half.
So I could certainly echo what the other folks have said. One of the things, though, that we learned the hard way was our knee-jerk reaction was to focus so hard on the remote folks, at the people at the plant. Said, we're starting to speak up. Hey, we're having a rough year too, and so from an engagement standpoint, we're not inclusive in terms of additional efforts and initiatives, and so to some degree, we've had to make some adjustments. I mean, in the form of, I think the meals are free now, and I think they've added like an omelet bar and things like that, just to reinforce that people are appreciated, and not just their work, but that folks are having a tough year. And I think it might have been Eli who mentioned that how are you doing just in terms of head check or pulse check, and we talk so much as a company about deep compassion, and I think it's easy to have deep compassion for the patient, but we also try to make a point to have deep compassion for one another. And so it's definitely a multifaceted approach depending on where the employee's working, and is it an off shift? Are they putting in a ton of overtime because there was folks on the team are in quarantine due to contact tracing? Or is it someone like myself or some of our IT folks that have the opportunity to work from home and have a tremendous amount of flexibility? And so we just try to take a more of a customized approach to making sure that folks are doing all right and engaged and still feeling like they're a part of it.
Great, thanks. One of the, I'm sure you guys have seen the comments that IT folks do like to be able to have time to train and get new skills. So from a technical perspective, I think that one is still really valid, and trying to help them make and find the time to do that is really good. One of the other things that came up, and Kevin, you alluded to this a little bit, is alternative sources to finding people. And you referenced you use boot camps. Do any of you use co-ops? Are you sending your people to the boot camps to upskill them, or you're going to the boot camps or other sources to find the people? How are you kind of addressing those types of topics? And we'll kind of go in the same order: Kevin, Eli, Ryan, and Dan.
We attend the boot camps to find talent. We haven't sent anyone to a boot camp, so we hire from the boot camps. Another question was around Intra-Alliance. Very familiar with them and have used them in the past as far as bringing in more of the high school type co-ops. We have brought in co-ops. Unfortunately, this year we did not bring any in. It was just, from a logistics standpoint, just very hard to do. But we need to get back in the community and do those type of things. And we're looking forward to being able to do that again next year as far as bringing co-ops in, because we've done that and had great success with co-ops and hired them a couple years later after they actually graduated. So definitely see a lot of value in being able to do that.
Thanks. Eli, anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think if you're not getting creative with your sources, then you're going to miss out on talent. You have to look at all the different talent pools, understand what your organization's needs are, understand that some of those needs are going to come from a specific talent pool and talent source, and others just aren't going to be able to come from that. And so, building that bench, as we call it here, and having a number of community partners is really key to getting creative with how you get that talent.
Thanks. Ryan, you're kind of in a little different role, looking for talent everywhere and for all different levels and skill sets.
Yeah. I'd say that the more that we get involved with networking events, networking groups, the more people that we find. Good people tend to know good people. We've done a lot with Tech Elevator and their students and really giving back, and we found talent from that, but helping them, prepping them for interviews. A member of our team, Kat Bashong, joined the organization Get With It, which is women in IT, and it's just like doing some awesome things. And we've met so many people that are also involved. And then you think back, I mean, we hosted a virtual beer tasting, a virtual wine tasting, and we've got clients, we've got targets, and just simply people that we've met through, organizations like this. And you get to talking, and you're trying to get creative, and then, hey, I actually know someone that I would like to introduce you to. And that could be a client, that could be an internal candidate. But the more that we're out there and not just in here on the phones, doing the 8 to 5 gig, the more people that we meet. So we really focus on community involvement and networking like this.
Okay. Dan, I know you referenced, needing highly skilled, highly educated, experienced folks for a lot of your roles. I'm sure that's not the case for all of them.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge, especially as it relates to IT. We do have a strong employer referral program that's been very successful. We've got a few pharmaceutical industry specific search partners that we work with. But good, bad, or otherwise, we rely on consultants to help bridge the gap, especially as it relates to some of the projects. I'd hate to see what the spend is on those, but sometimes it's just necessary to keep things moving while we're doing our search simultaneously.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, that really kind of covers the questions we've received so far in the chat. So given that there aren't any more, and I believe in just going as long as it provides value, we'll give everybody a little time back on their day from what was probably on your calendars. Again, thank you so much to our panel members, Kevin and Eli from Health Carousel, Ryan from Vernovis, and Dan from Alkermes. And again, a huge thank you to Steve Bernicke and Centric for being our partner throughout this year. We greatly appreciate it. As always, like I said, we would love to have any comments, feedback, ideas, suggestions from all of you, and wish you all a very, very happy holiday. We look forward to seeing you again in January.